Welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. Now, as we cover the bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's NL Dan. I'm AL Warren.
And Warren, you may have heard Ipe Mizuhara, Otani's ex-interpreter, according to federal authorities, stole up to $16 million from Shohei Otani over 3+ years at least to feed a seemingly endless gambling addiction. Citing text messages and several pages of evidence, Otani seemingly has been vindicated of any involvement. What do you think, Warren? I'm asking you today. Do you believe this whole story that's been put out there? And where does this leave us with this whole Otani situation?
Wow. Thanks so much for flipping the script on me. I didn't expect the question to be set my way
Curveballs.
first. Oh, I love it. Let's hit this one out of the park. What a wild story, and what an amazing update to learn that it seems like, thank God, the Babe Ruth of our generation isn't, for now, indicted in this. It doesn't seem to be connected. It's a blessing to know that, the gambling wasn't even on baseball. Ipe's gambling wasn't even on baseball. That's crazy to me. And because of that, I really do buy this. I do buy this. I think that this poor guy got manipulated into hiring somebody who was really good at conning him out of his money. And he's like a hero internationally. He's one of the greatest baseball players we'll ever see. We should be blessed he's even here. But you look at how cool, calm, and collected he is through all this, and you can't help but wonder, like, how can you be functional right now? How can you still swing the bat? How can you still be so focused on what you love? It seems impossible, except that, in another culture, on another side of the world, just they're able to compartmentalize their priorities. I think a little better than, or differently, we'll say, than you or I, right? So there's so much to think about on this, but I have to believe it. I have to believe it because I don't want us to have to basically criminalize and cancel the greatest baseball player you and I are probably ever going to see in our lives. Am I right? What do you think? Do you really want to sniff deeper into Shohei's potential involvement? Like I said, doesn't look like the gambling was even on baseball. So why would Shohei care? He doesn't seem like he has room for that. All right, I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, he definitely, it seems like a victim in this whole thing. Like, there's evidence of bookmakers threatening Ipe with approaching Otani and talking to him about the whole thing, which kind of shows you that he was probably in the dark about the whole thing. And information about Ipe basically having all of his bank information and being able to be a barrier between Otani and the people that he pays to protect him, like his agent and his financial advisor. I mean, it's a situation where it looks like this guy just took advantage of him, and it's sad. And I feel bad for Otani, and I kind of hope that's the end of it. And
Yeah.
Ipe's already in custody, and he's going to be handled in his own way. And Otani should be allowed to put this behind him.
No, yeah, absolutely. And what a thing to overcome, He's got to trust people again. He's part of a professional team, It's wild. He's got to trust his interpreter. It's a weird place to be in his head, I'm sure, and I'm sure he's just grateful baseball's there. And I think when you read articles and hear snippets of his conversations, it's like, thank God it's that. Let's go forward, please. Like, let me just focus on my game. And, the Dodgers look human through all this, don't they? You can see that this
Yep.
week. Not, um, we can talk about that more in a little bit, but on this topic, it's been crazy to think we would perhaps have to carve Shohei Otani out of history, and for now, it doesn't look like that's the case. And I hope we are all in agreement that we don't want to dig any deeper than that. And shame on Ipe Mitsuhara for being so manipulative, cunning, abusive, gaslighting. Like, talk about a problem of a symptom of today's climate. But we're not here to talk about that. Those are the wrong bases to cover, Dan. We're
Yeah.
not here to be,
Let's not get into
so
gambling addiction and all that just so far. Let's
sociologists, right?
Yeah,
Um,
the only AA we have here is our batting average.
oh, yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, we can leave that there too. But I'm so excited to sit down and talk more baseball as week two really is finished up and we start looking forward to another great weekend of series. The I would like to say there's a lot of parity around the league. And apart from two teams that we know can't possibly win at all, but can seemingly play spoilers quite frequently in not frequently in the terms of the Rockies, but like they won tonight, for example. And then on the other side, you have the Oakland Athletics, right? Those teams are not going to win at all, but they've got some great stories this week, don't they? I'm definitely going to talk a little bit about the Athletics anyway. What do you think, man? A lot of parity around the league. All the other teams out there can kind of beat everybody on any given night and may steal a series. We're still not sure where everybody lands. But if you zero in on each team, you could definitely feel there's intangibles. What do you think of the stories developing here as week
Yeah,
two comes to a close?
yeah, man, you're right. There's definitely been a lot of parity. We're seeing a lot of teams have individual players still trying to get the spring training jitters out of the way and warm up and get their bats up and to what we know that they can be. And we see other teams with a lot of young prospects who are still working through the day to day of being in the majors. And as we get now into the third week of consecutive baseball games, the grind starts to come in for some of these younger players and affect some of their plays on the field. So yeah, we see a lot of small things, and we've seen a lot of tightly contested games. The offense has been good this year, Warren. We're seeing a lot of runs, so the pitch clock is doing what we thought it would do. It's speeding up the game, and we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing more hits and more contact and more, you know, 7 to 8 games rather than the 2 to 3 games that we may have seen in the past. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
it's an exciting time. The baseball has been good, and there's evidence just from the eye test looking at a lot of these teams to think that we should still have a lot of good things to see. A lot of teams can improve massively.
Yes, absolutely. I think your team improved. I think my team took humble steps to improve, and the I think defense especially did get a little tighter, and the teams that aren't going to get better at defense got a little bit more glaringly bad, or positions. We saw a lot of problems with, say, Manny Machado is really struggling over there at his
Yeah.
third base. But we don't need to just throw him over the coals alone. We'll try to hit others along the way. I just remember some pretty bad performances there. Anyway, so many things to discuss. Why don't you lead us into the base hits portion of the show so that we can start detailing some of the teams that maybe aren't our risers guys and aren't our sinkers, but we got to try to cover all our bases and hopefully we got something to say about everybody here. What do
Yeah,
you
let's
say, Dan?
start let's start going around the bases, Warren. Let's start with
Oh
Atlanta.
boy.
Why not? Let's do it. Everybody knew from the start of the year that they would be one of the hot teams. They came in pretty loaded. They've been deep in the playoffs the last couple of years. And yeah, they've done really well so far. But kind of the news coming out of there is Spencer Strider went down with a UCL injury. He's going to miss the rest of the year. Kind of one of a long list of names that are dealing with this sort of thing. So uh, it's already affecting the starting rotation for Atlanta. Max Fried has had a really poor start to the season. Now losing Strider, they're a bit thinner than they
Mhm.
thought they were, but their offense has been good enough to make up for it. I mean, there's games that Warren, you've seen them giving up 7, 8 runs, and still they could be down in the eighth inning for most of the game and come back and win it. I mean, they can hang with anybody offensively
Yes.
right now, and that is really bolstering them. They're leading the way in the NL East. Have you seen any Braves games?
Well, I really do my best to keep a track of every single step along the schedule, right? What I was really impressed by was their sweep of the Diamondbacks, right? As we recorded last week's episode, that was pretty impressive. And I do know that my good buddy, who's been starting to follow our show, shout out to Sam Tate, he is becoming a newfound Braves fan because of our content a little bit. And he keeps tweeting me stuff like, tweeting. Nobody tweets anymore. Sorry, guys. But he's telling me stuff like how Olson and Azuna are really the only driving forces of their offense. But then I tune in and I see Travis d'Arnaud contributing. And I see, I don't think Riley's maybe scoring runs, but he's passing the baton. So, and you and I have to confess that I suppose Jared Kelnick is on at the plate at the right time to be
Yeah.
able to take advantage of a lot of guys on base in front of him, and he's been getting some good hits. So, not that I'm not that negative towards the guy. I think he belongs in Atlanta. So, I'm happy for them.
Atlanta
Playing
did
good
something
baseball.
that Seattle and New York couldn't, Warren. They did something for Jared.
They helped him feel comfortable, you
Yeah.
know. But when you want to walk up to take me home country road, I think quite frankly, you may feel a little out of place in the grunge land of Seattle, Washington. Anyway, welcome. Enjoy yourself. Those Atlanta Braves, man, they're not going to slow down. I know that those obstacles that you did detail, the pitching concerns, big deal. Now a big need for them. How on earth do they maybe find a solution to this? They keep an eye on those other teams that are trending downward, and maybe get ready to spring on some of their talent as that trade deadline gets ever closer. But we're probably not thinking about that for another maybe 40 or 50 games, but you have to think that Atlanta's front office is doing that already, wouldn't you say, Dan?
You got to make contingency plans for sure, just in case you're in a situation where you're coming down to where it matters. But honestly, Warren, their offense looks good enough that they might run away with the division, and they might not be worried about seeding come the end of the year. But you're right; it's way too early to really look too far at that. But hey, speaking of seeding, Warren,
Yeah.
the Phillies are right there behind them. The Phillies are trying to
Mm,
keep pace right there with the Atlanta Braves, and the offense is starting to pick up. It was the kind of the cold start this year. We saw them struggle against some weaker teams, and I don't know, Warren. Do you think that they're showing a steady improvement, or is it just Harper kind of popping off here and there, giving them an extra win when they need it?
well, I think that the Phillies are getting all the wins that they need from great performances on the mound. You talk about Nola, we talk about Wheeler. That's everything that is truly needed right now. Because I'll still attest to you, man, pitching is what wins championships. And the Phillies pitching gives them a chance at all times. I know that they're struggling a little bit with their outfield and getting offensive production from the center field position. As much as you like the defensive pieces out there, I think it's Johan Rojas, of course. And I'm a big Brandon Marsh fan, but I guess he's moved over to left field. And even though he's offensively producing too, they're crying a little bit in that area. But they're not a steamrolling team. They're not a team that's going to dominate. I would say in their current incarnation, they're still tuning up for the lawn battle throughout the year. But they've got all the right pieces. Kyle Schwarber's so scary when he gets going, and he's added some speed to his game. I don't know if you've noticed this, but he's running the base paths better than he ever has in my mind. So, um, the Phillies are going to be difficult to pry out of this scenario, especially if their pitchers continue to avoid the bug of injuries we've been seeing recently. That's going to be huge. Pitcher health in this climate is going to be huge going into championships. So, watch the marathon and hope that your, pitchers don't lose their arms, literally. What do you think, Dan? Am I overblowing the importance of pitching? Captain
No.
offense is all it takes.
It's we talked about how you need on average so many more starters than you did back in the day. I mean, starting pitchers don't go 7, 8, 9 innings like they used to. You'd be lucky to have a starting pitcher pitch 7 complete innings. I mean, you don't see it as much. So it's about quantity over quality, I would say. over the long term, as your Mariners would say, Warren, we're trying to win a majority of the games. So that means having a majority of good pitchers. And hey, if you're up in a 6-1 game and you throw a guy out there who hasn't gone out in a couple of days and he gives up 2 runs, that's okay. You're still winning the game. And it's on the aggregate. It's on the aggregate. The Phillies are playing the aggregate game, and they're hoping that when it comes down to it, they'll just be in the dance in the playoffs. And they might be right. It might not be good enough. It could fall apart, and they could miss the playoffs completely. But I don't know. They might be right.
But what did I tell you, Dan? They were not bad enough, I'm sure, to warrant a sinker
And you were right.
annotation from you this week. Yep, thank you very much. Series wins over the Nats and the Cardinals, and that has this penciled in wild card looking ready to hang in, even on the division race. It's not maybe just all about the wild card as of this moment. Pitching health, they're okay. They're a lot better than maybe the Mets are, and they're better than where Atlanta is. So this could be an opportunity, a big one for the Phillies to make themselves stand out in the division even more so. So see what they do with this. And Dan, standing out is it definitely not what this next team does, is it? In third place in the National League East, the base to cover is the Washington Nationals, who since our last recording have gone 3-4, Dan. Their total record sits at 5-8. They have a negative 15 run differential, and with series upcoming against Oakland, which is favorable perhaps to them. I don't know. Is it? We'll talk on that in a bit. And then the Dodgers, who will probably, crush them mercilessly in the coming week. But the Nationals, bud. Tell us about the big news breaking, of course, about one of their best pitchers and the league's best pitchers until the fateful injury that, well, sadly is leading to Steven Strasburg's retirement.
Yeah, well, you just told us, Warren. Steven Strasburg is retiring. He's kind of at odds ends with the team, and they were kind of at an impasse on how they were going to structure his retirement. He didn't want to defer any money from the big contract he signed in 2019, literally the last time he actually pitched for them. So it's just been injury after injury for the last 5 years since then. And yeah, he's getting the last 2 years of his contract after his retirement. But, they do it on amicable terms, which is the right way to end things. So Strasburg retires a National, and I'm sure he'll be in their Ring of Honor. But yeah, definitely kind of the changing of the guard now. With him gone, it really is next generation. And we're seeing it on the field. You got guys like Lane Thomas and CJ Abrams starting to heat up at the plate a little bit, making good plays in the field, and starting to see a little bit of the future. The Nationals coming through. I think a lot of people assumed they'd be worse than Miami last year because they kind of popped off a little bit and sank the Nats to the bottom of the division. But the Nationals are really starting to pop. And hey, Warren, this fun stat for you this week. The Nationals are leading the league in stolen bases with 25. This team is all about the bags. They maybe know that they're not going to get all the hits and get a lot of runners on base, but they're taking advantage when they are. And yeah, we'll see what they can do against even the Dodgers. I don't know that they'll get smacked around. I could see them steal one here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they can maybe take one off the Dodgers. As I said, the Dodgers are looking a little human. I'm a little woeful to have to admit that Jesse Winker has been contributing a lot for this Nationals team. Somebody who's still probably super grateful to have a starting job wherever he's at. But CJ Abrams is playing really well for this team. You've got some amazing bag running from Lane Thomas, keeping that like a big part of his focus. Jacob Young and Victor Lipscomb have also been contributing a lot of stolen bags, and it's fun to see because maybe we talked about the Reds last season. I know I harp on and on about how they really manipulated the game a little bit with how many stolen bases they got. Well, the Reds clearly were paying attention. Excuse me, the Nationals were clearly paying attention and maybe lifted that part of the game from the Reds a little bit. So it's exciting to see that it's spreading because feast on those bags. Make those pitchers uncomfortable. That's the best thing you can do with this pitching clock meta is stress them out and dance on them and then
And the increased base paths this year.
Yeah, Yeah, made it a little bit easier, didn't they?
Yeah,
They're encouraging it. The action is really picking up on that. And the Nationals themselves, took a series off the Giants this week, Dan. The Giants may not be turning out to be getting off to the best start, but they definitely have the pieces to put together a potent offense at the very minimum. So outpacing them offensively, that's got to be proud of that if you're the Nats. You're probably a little bit ahead of schedule, wouldn't you say?
definitely. And it's also worth noting that their fielding percentage is tops in the league. They have 4 errors, so up there with only 3 other teams that have that little amount. So like they're playing confidently in the field too, which is a great step for the younger players, in the outfield and the infield. So these things are moving in the right direction for Washington. They're not in a rush, but they're taking things slowly and things are on the uptick. Not
They really,
necessarily a riser, but uptick.
mm, yes, true, not rising enough. I agree. But, it's funny. You can almost call them truly those 2023 Reds all over again, in a way.
Well, we'll see if they promote an Ellie.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Get a good prospect in here. Makes me
Hmm.
want to pull up the prospects, but I'm sure we've already covered this base enough. Um,
I think Lane is the big one. He got to start the year with the team.
oh, I love Lane Thomas so much. I think he's a fantastic young player. He's so agile, defensively comfortable, and offensively, he does what he needs to do to again apply that pressure. Lane Thomas is a great player to have. If the Nationals sink low enough, he'd be a piece I would want to pick up. But I don't think he's like threatening to leave the team in anytime soon. So losing his contract isn't on their radar. Oh, Dan, the Marlins won something. Did you see that?
What? No, what did they steal it? What do you mean?
Yeah, no, the Marlins straight up won a baseball game. They actually won two since the last
What?
time you and I spoke. I know. I was thinking maybe they were going to get off to like an 0-20 start or something like that. So many unfavorable series in their schedule
Ugh.
here to get started, but no, they went 2-3 since the last time we spoke. They're now 2-11 overall. They actually were able to win their ninth game of this series or the season to avoid going 0-10, which I would want to too, wouldn't you? But they still sit at a negative 30 run differential and
Oh,
are,
so bad.
yeah, currently getting suited up for a series with Atlanta next. So you can't expect this to get any better for them. You gotta just shake your head at Miami. They actually have the one of the league leaders in RBI on their team, Jake Berger. Did you realize this? He's got
Yeah.
15. Yeah, 15 RBI, which by the way, I think there's four players tied for the league lead in RBI, and they're all in the National League, which I think is crazy with
Yeah.
15. And then the three after that are all from the American League. I'll have to bring up the list, but it's just wild. But yeah,
Yeah,
Miami's
and that
got pieces.
Burger
They just can't win, dude.
it's individual performances like that because they only have 47 runs scored, Warren. So Burger's like a
Mm.
quarter, more than a quarter of all of the team's runs scored. And I kind of feel like this is a lot more of the Marlins team we would have seen last year if we didn't have like Alcantara starting every fifth day and
Hmm.
Luis Ariz performing at the level that he was, still a batting title. Like we saw a drop off this year, and it
Big time.
feels like we're seeing the rest of the team drop off that level hard. And you're right, they're not getting any favors with series, and the series coming up equally are going to be just as difficult. Like this, it feels like they should have just given up on this core and broke it down and went full rebuild, but they kind of tried to patchwork it and stay competitive. And they snuck in with a wild card last year, and that was like a reward, right? Like they're like, oh, maybe
Hmm.
this is working, and no, it wasn't working. Like, don't get false signs from success. You got success from out of the team. That was your maximizing result. That's great, but that was the maximum. Like
Your
realize
big
that.
your big plus was getting Jake Berger from the White Sox near the trade deadline, right? To push your butt into the playoffs offensively. And he's been incredible for you
Mhm.
here as you get going in 2024. But, he does I'm sure there will be somebody who will lift him off your friggin' hands when you lose enough games. And the culture, dude, we've talked about this, how the culture isn't doing a good job of rewarding those players who are on that roster for being there, thanking them. It's not a good vibe. So I think that's affecting Arias. I swear to God, the intangibles. Like, forgive me, guys. I don't mind thinking about the voodoo or the witchery behind baseball. Like, there is so much superstition, and you know this, Dan. And I know none of the traditional superstitions, but I do know like almost baseball karma has a flow to it. And Miami's just suiting up for some bad karma, is what it feels like. On top of the Alcantara injury is probably the key example. Oh, there's so many regrettable aspects to this team. I think this is going to be, honestly, dude, the worst team of 2024 when history says all it's going to say.
You might be right. They're headed that direction. There's not a lot of bright spots. I mean, Jazz is still on this team. That's about it.
Yeah, but yeah, and I know how motivated he is to have a good year and show out a little bit, but that's going to have a shelf life. And I think Arias is already playing dramatically different enough that something's in his head and not sitting right. I don't know if you know what I mean? When you go from being a batting title contending batter consistently for several years and you get off to the start he's getting off to now, you got to think there's something in his head right now that is not aligned with winning baseball games in Miami.
Yep. And it's not too late, but he's probably in his own head and he thinks it's too late and it's making it worse. It's not too late. Start now. It's a long season.
Well, yeah, but it's too late for the season if you ask me as they get ready
Mhm.
again for Atlanta. Even the Giants in Chicago are probably like more potent offenses than what they might be able to put up consistently. So, oh, good luck, Fish. You're going to be out of water pretty soon. Dan, I think we've transitioned into a different division. You may notice something was missing, but we'll worry about that later.
Yeah, don't think
Uh,
about it.
yeah, instead, look there on the horizon. There
Oh,
be a flag.
what's that?
Aye, it be the pirate ship, lad.
Is that a Jolly Roger?
Aye, and raise it ye did, for a winning record again go to the Pirates of
Mhm.
Pittsburgh. 4-3 this previous week, laddie. They're now 10-4 overall, which is just exciting to see come out of Pittsburgh with a plus 18 run differential because that offense can do stuff. And even though the Phillies are currently splitting their series right at the moment, it's a fantastic battle of heavyweights in the National League contendership, at least in this early portion of the season. Oh, and they also have the Mets on the docket. Gosh, what was that team we forgot? Anyway, um, dude, the Pirates are so good. They took 2 of 3 from Baltimore. What a solid upset. And you you gotta wonder how many more wins before we actually start to take this team seriously. Dan, what do you think?
You're right. Like their offense is literally up there in the league. They're right behind Atlanta, LA, and Milwaukee in the National League, and right there with Arizona. Like we should be taking them way more seriously than we are. I mean, Warren,
Mm-hmm.
Andrew McCutcheon, Henry Davis, these guys aren't even going off yet. Like this is Brian Hayes, this is O'Neill Cruz. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is all the other aspects of the team taking that next step. Like just wait until Kutch gets going. That they really are dangerous, and they are ripe for this division. Absolutely. And hey, Warren, little fun stat here for the Pirates for you because the success. I mean, it's coming from all over the place. They're doing great on the
Mm-hmm.
road. They're winning at home, in division, intra league, all over.
Mm-hmm.
Something I noticed though, they are a league best 5-1 against lefty starting pitchers. Nobody else has more than three, Warren.
Oh man,
They are
that's
crushing
impressive.
lefties.
That's incredible. It'd be fun to kind of dive in and see who really is pouncing on those opportunities best. I think one of them has got to be good old O'Neill Cruz, man. He has
Definitely.
been a beast, yes, as we get going. There was a couple of I was watching, I think, Pittsburgh game earlier on midweek, and there was a stumble from him, and I got real stressed for a second because I really want him to have a good year. He's so important for the for the Pirates, and so it's such a fun story. But it seems like he's okay. I'm sorry. I'm so overworked about this team. I'm really rooting for them. Um, Brian Reynolds is off to a hot start. I love Connor Joe as a glue guy, right? I picked him up on
Yeah.
my MLB The Show because I realized how important he is to the Pirates, and Jack Sawinski is a threat to be reckoned with each time he comes to the plate. Like, this is a solid lineup right now, and I completely forgot Michael A. Taylor was on this team. Like, how did we miss that in our rev up for this squad? I think it was a late preseason signing, huh? Um,
Yeah.
but the WRC is floating around this squad, and it's exciting, keeping their season buoyant, guys. All of the other boat puns. I'm just thrilled to think that the Pirates might truly be about 20 wins, 30 wins away, from showing us that they mean business, and it could come sooner than we think it will. It could be a hot team all the way up. Remember, I predicted that they wouldn't fall off till September, and right now, like, the only team that feels like they could contend is Milwaukee, but boy, could Milwaukee contend? I'm curious if you think that the Brewers are a flash in the pan, but I don't know. There's a splotch on my page over the Brewers. I guess we
Hmm.
just have to move on to a different team.
Yarg. Pirates.
Anything else you wish to say about the Pirates before we maybe check in with a different base to cover?
I'll just say that like we saw it last year with Ellie, and now more so like this year again with O'Neal Cruz. I love these tall shortstops, dude. It's so fun to watch them run towards second base and make a jump, and you can just tell from the hop that like, oh, they're not going to get it. And dude's like 6'7", jumps. He's going over 8 feet in the air and makes the grab like nothing. It's crazy. It's changing the game. To see shortstops that tall and still be that athletic. I mean, we're seeing it
Hmm.
in other sports too. It really is going to change the game. And yeah, just exciting to see these young players.
Yeah, the development of the athleticism is consistently inspiring, and one of my favorite aspects of the game too. That's what makes the Reds such an appealing team to want to talk about, and it does translate to other athletes of similar atypical frame. It's cool to see. Remember Daryl Strawberry? Maybe was an example of a player that
Of
maybe fit
course.
that kind of physical mold,
Mets
or
legend, Daryl Strawberry.
wasn't he kind of lengthy and tall like that?
Yep. Center fielder.
Mm-hmm. You know, those kind of athletes are not super duper common. So you get excited when, specimens come out and you wonder what kind of things will they get their body to do as their career progresses. And the younger ones are usually pretty flighty and speedy, and yeah, well, we're seeing that play out. But you know what else is played out is the base that the Buccos are standing on. So let's knock them off their pedestal and move along into the National League Central and maybe bring up those Chicago Cubs, who, boy, are they having a hot and cold week. They go about 3-4 since you and I chatted last, and now sit at 7-6 overall, just a shade above 500. They are a pretty potent offense with a +8 run differential. And even though they fell to my Seattle Mariners tonight, I would attribute that more to phenomenal pitching by Bryce Miller and a lot less towards what this team can do. So, Chicago, what do you think, man? Would you put them, higher or lower than you did the week before, perhaps, in your mind?
Yeah, they've definitely shown like a better offense than I thought they would be at this point. Uh, Even without Bellinger necessarily popping off, he's been good enough, and yeah, they've been strong enough to make up for the deficiency in pitching, and that's really what this is. They're like a bottom 10 team in pitching right now. Kyle Hendricks has been like horrible through 3 starts, 5.17 ERA, just very unusual. He's never been this bad for any stretch in his career. 17 runs
Hmm.
against him, so that is going to be a huge problem for them going forward if they don't get that figured out. But Shoto Amanga had a much better start. He didn't get all the way through, but he's improving. He's settling in. They're starting to see better control from him, and that's what was important. And Seiya Suzuki's improved defense in the outfield. It's unfortunate to see that his bat isn't quite up to speed yet, and that's a little bit of a lacking point where they could really use that extra boost. But that'll come along, and yeah, it's good to see that side of it. But other than that, Chicago is they're right there. They're in the mix. They're winning where they have to. Interesting couple
Hmm.
series coming up, so that'll be a test.
Yes, you referenced those series. That's definitely going to be appealing to see where they stack up with Arizona at this stage of the season. But they should be okay with Miami after that. So they've got some room to play, and if they do really well against Arizona, we'll be not only really surprised to be winning so consistently, but sincerely impressed. So good on you, Cubos, for staying, well, still formidable as we still wait to understand where between 6 and 18 weeks we're going to expect to be without Justin Steele. 6 and 18, that cracks me up. Such a disbalance. Um, and they look good tonight. I mean, as a team that was, watching them very closely, wishing that maybe, we'd see some holes in their armor. There were a few, and well, I'm excited to see where else the series moves on for Seattle and Chicago. We'll move on too, because I keep bringing up the Reds in my mind. They're clouding me. Sorry, I know the Cubs got a bad segment from me this week, but it's just because I can't stop thinking about the Reds. And even though they're kind of starting to trend towards the lower portion of this division at 3-4 this week, and 7-6 is along with the Cubs, they're still so much fun to watch. And well, they're getting ready for a battle with the Chicago White Sox, and that's going to help tune them up. When you think, I'm certain they've got some wins coming their way. But don't you like at least following the Cincinnati Reds a little bit, Dan?
Yeah, definitely. They're fun to watch, and still a lot of young talent on that team. And we were a little bit well, I should say I was a little bit concerned about how much playing time they would get for a lot of their infielders. They had so many infielders to start the year, and
Yo,
that
yeah.
problem very quickly worked itself out. So that's really not a concern anymore. But a lot of the power is out of their lineup. They're definitely missing McLean right about now.
Mm,
The pitching has been good, but the offense hasn't quite been what you would want it to be, what we saw from them last year. They're still fast, 23 stolen bags already, and the long ball is slowly coming along. They're at 13 right now. So they're heating up. I could definitely see them taking advantage of a couple weaker series, but they have struggled in their own division. They have a couple more games in their own division coming up. So they need to get over that and try and climb ahead. They have less injuries at this point than a couple of their other teams in their division already, surprisingly to say. So they need to take the next step here and take advantage of this. And then when McLean comes back and Marte, it'll be like reinforcements. That's what they need to work towards.
all right, Dan. The LA Dodgers signal our arrival to the National League West, and they're as awesome as they can possibly be, except they actually lost 4 games this week. They did win 3. They're now at 10-6. They have a 14-run differential, trending on the positive, of course, because they're the Dodgers. They're going to score a lot of runs. And they're embroiled with another battle within their division. Seems like that's all they get to do, right? Is beat up their division to start the year. And right now, with the Padres, we're getting a really good look at where they stand since Seoul. How do you like this matchup at this stage of the season?
Yeah, Seoul was great, and we already saw the first game of the Dodgers Padres series. And just like the last couple of years, this is going to be great baseball for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We saw powerhouse offense in Seoul, and that seemed to carry on. The Dodgers have been hot. They're second in the league to Atlanta, and they really have showed no signs of slowing down. San Diego's right there, though, and they were able to outgun them in extras. And that's something that is starting to be a little bit of a nosebleed for the Dodgers. They are 3-3 in one-run games, and that's something that they probably expect to outgun a lot of other teams, but you would hope that they would fare a little bit better. 0-2 in extras as well, Warren. So struggling there. So that's a little bit of a concern. But other than that, the offense has been as potent as expected. Glasnow is really settling in, so the rotation is not in as weak a place as it was even a week ago. They're looking a
Mm-hmm.
lot better. And the only thing that seems to worry Yamamoto is those brown San Diego jerseys because he's great against every other team, but Padres are his kryptonite, Warren.
Ooh, yeah. Well, the brown color works on the eyes like it works on the ears. The brown sound. If you caught that
Brown noise?
episode of, yeah, that one. Thank you. Thank you for
Ah!
getting that over.
I don't need an example.
Yeah, really. Gosh, what a terrible segue. The Cubs were able to be the only team that these guys beat 2 out of 3 from this past week because, oh no, they got the Twins too. They whooped the Twins. That makes sense. They're still rolling. It's just surprising, dude, that the Padres were able to lift this first game in the series, only to me because, as really plucky and potent these Padres have been this past week, pleasantly. You just still expect this Dodgers team to be a step ahead. So we'll see if they can take, the other two in this series, or at least the one more to win it and gain some more momentum. What do you think? How about these pitching matchups coming up in the series? Is that something we think we can at least survey real quick and check out? Because that can really tell a lot of what we get to look forward to. I'm excited. I'm looking for these pitching matchups, buddy. Because Glasnow has been incredible. When you
Mhm.
say, you can speak on that.
Definitely. His control was really coming in and his velocity is up. And it's concerning in a time where you're seeing so many of these guys with high velocity go down with injuries. And I'm not jinxing nothing. Like Glasnow has had a share of injuries, and he's at a point right now where he looks like he's rolling. It's exactly what the Dodgers paid for. It's kind of a gamble they took on him, and it looks like it's paying off.
Oh, 100%. Now, Dodgers will continue to be a superpower, but this next team, not so much. Maybe one of, as I mentioned, the only two teams that you can have zero faith to make it to the postseason, even at this stage of the season. How about the Colorado Rockies? Let's quickly cover this base. They're 3-4, believe it or not, this week, winning more games here in week 2 than they were able to muster in week 1. They're now 4-10 with a negative 27 run differential. Remember, they were the team on the other end of that Arizona Diamondbacks beatdown. It was like 3-16 or something terrible. And no matter who they match up with, Dan, on the schedule, they look unfavorable, right? There's no way you can root for them. But Ryan McMahon, I'd like to just say out loud, has been a super good bright spot for them offensively, and that's what you look for. You just look for bright spots. You look for, Charlie Blackmon to have a healthy final year potentially on the league, and you look for Ezekiel Tovar to prove that he is worthy of the contract he just signed. And those things are pretty much happening. Then beyond those three, though, you got nothing to talk about in Colorado, wouldn't you say, Dan?
Yeah, nothing too surprising. Like typical Colorado, their offense is a little inflated, mid-league average because of their home building, and the pitching is way worse because of it. They are able to win a couple games at home, but yeah, 0-3 and 1-1 games, 1-6 away from home. They're bad. Like you mentioned, they're might well be one of the worst teams of the league this year, unfortunately. But yeah, bright spots. This week it's Ryan McMahon. We'll see if we can find some more.
Ooh, the weekly challenge. Can you find the diamond in the rough for the Colorado Rockies? Which of the terrains is the most smooth? We'll work on it, but we'll find a bright spot for the Rockies each week if we can. Um, well, boo. Why stay with them anymore? Let's just jump ship. As a matter of fact, they stink so
Just
bad.
polar opposite.
I want to leave. Yeah, I want to go to the other league that makes up Major League Baseball. Let's go to the American League and let's land right where uh, Mother Liberty oversees everything. How about the New York Yankees, man? You think the mega power continues to roll, and largely they did. They're 4-2 this past week since you and I last recorded, and at 10-3 this season. They're the superpower, perhaps. They're still the best record in baseball, I think. Let me know if I'm missing that. They do have a plus 15 run differential. They're right up there anyway. There's a couple teams that are contending with them, and one of them is who they're playing next in the Cleveland Guardians. After that, they got yet another series with Toronto, and then they just play them.
Yep.
The New York Yankees are beasts, man. What are you gonna do? Stanton again looks like a masher, and you've got Juan Soto being incredible. Judge, I think, finally woke up, right? Starting to play a little
Yep.
bit better offensively, but what do you think about their pitching situation? Because I know you can speak on that.
They're playing confident baseball. Nestor has played very well. Stroman has been a leader for them in the absence of Garrett Cole. And it looks like they made the right decision, I'll say quickly, in shipping out Michael King, who has struggled in San Diego. And their bullpen has been pretty
Mm.
supportive. And yeah, the offense has been good. It hasn't been necessarily top of the league, but they've got strong enough depth pitching that it's been enough for them to win most of these series. And they're 5-0 in one-run games, so they're no quit in them. They are all about those tight, close, late games, and that's really what it comes down to for a lot of these upcoming tough series they're going to have in their own division and in their league. So that the Yankees are kind of passing all the boxes right now. They're passing all the tests. They're checking all the boxes, Warren.
Which
They
hitting
really
them
are.
made the most sense on this
Yeah.
team, right? Let
Yeah,
me tell you
they just look
something.
good.
Carlos Rodon in 15 and two-thirds inning pitched so far this season has an ERA of 1.72. So he looks as good as he could possibly have ever been for the pitching staff on this team. And the offense is just gnarly. They're playing well. There's a good balance, right? Offensive production from a lot of the lineup. And you've got six players with more than one home run on this lineup. So doing great. John Carlos Stanton leading the way with four, though. So plenty of offensive firepower. You just gotta stay away from the middle of the plate against these guys. And it seems like they're playing well regardless of the opponent. But I was surprised to see them drop one against Miami the other day. I don't know about you. You shouldn't see the Yankees losing to Miami under any circumstances.
Yeah, the bats went cold in the home opener after the earthquake. Maybe they were just rattled.
There's your Rocky pun I needed earlier. Darn it.
Ah,
Dan, you're so talented. Gosh. I'm telling you, you should be the host of this show completely. Hey, bud. Speaking of hosts, the team that we thought was going to host everyone else in this division and show them the door at the end, wish them well, the Baltimore Orioles, they're kind of, sort of, also human, like to those Dodgers this past week. They're
yeah.
4-3, still playing well, and they're now 8-5 overall. They have an 18 positive run differential, sure, but they did take a wallop to the jaw tonight against Milwaukee, which, can we. Well, again, the splotch on the page for the Brewers left me a little disappointed. Maybe I've got somebody retyping my notes anyway
Hmm.
for them. But, this is gnarly, dude. The Baltimore Orioles are a really good team, we think. But they did lose a series to the Pirates. And Jackson Holliday's big debut, while it did kick off with a double play defensively, hasn't done anything offensively for this team. He hasn't actually recorded a hit yet. So, how are we feeling in Baltimore? Are we still as hyped for this? Hopefully, time will iron everything out, and we really haven't given much. Small sample size, right? So, we're probably pretty still excited for this team.
Still excited. A lot of sophomore years, so maybe their 236 team batting average is a little bit lower than what we know their ceiling could be. You mentioned Jackson. I mean, try and pick a guy that has more pressure on him right now than
Mm.
Jackson Holiday. So maybe he is going to be slow rolling in, and he's playing out of his natural position as well in the field. And we have seen that affect players at the plate when they don't play in their normal, comfortable position. So the argument could be made that Mookie is doing as well as he is because he's back to shortstop, which is a position he used to love to play and excelled
Hmm.
in offensively when he played it last time. So there might be a correlation there. Baltimore, I mean, they have pitching that's good enough to keep them in it. Burns has still been a leader for them, and yeah, they're definitely not having the start that they would have wanted to, but the division luckily hasn't been as potent outside of the Yankees. So they're still in it, and there's no reason for them to panic. Holiday coming up as early as he did is a good call. We criticized him for not starting the year, but you know what? It's good that they called him up early. We're only in week 3. If he needs to struggle for a month before he can settle in, then that still gives them plenty of time to remain competitive.
Oh yeah, I'm not worried for this Baltimore lineup at all. As a matter of fact, I was watching a little bit more Baltimore Orioles baseball over this past week than I usually do, and I have to say, did Gunnar Henderson just do puberty all over again over the offseason or what? It's like he's coming back looking like Reese Hoskins and ready to mash stuff.
Yep,
Like he and his offensive output, excuse me, is reflecting that he's got the most home runs on the lineup right now at 3. And you're getting kind of a balanced group there. I mean, how about shout out to Colton Cowser for contributing offensively in that regard? I don't
big
think
time.
any of us had him, yeah, on our bingo cards of successful Baltimore Orioles per se. So this team's got plenty of pieces and plenty of time to figure out how to make them work. And what's the word I'm looking for? Root, hooray, or whatever for Jackson Holiday coming up. You know,
Hip
it's
hip.
only a matter of time. That's it. Hip, hip.
Root
Thank
root
you.
hooray.
I couldn't remember. It's the most stupid thing, but I couldn't remember root, hip, hip, hooray. Um, Neither could this team remember hip hip hooray because they had kind of a down week. Toronto Blue Jays here or there. Of course they had a bright spot. Shut up, all of you out there who are like, Warren, they beat Seattle. I'm aware. But in the third game of that series, anyway, 3-4 was their week. Were the Toronto Blue Jays? They're 6-8 overall. They're kind of trending downward though when it comes to giving up runs. They're at a minus 25 on the run differential, and they have some room to make that up a little bit with a series upcoming with the Rockies. But then they've got the Yankees to contend with again, and we just got over talking about how they just seem to play each other quite a bit. But Dan, you're right. Having watched a lot of Toronto in the last couple of days, this is a strangely hot and cold team, and you can tell certain pieces on their lineup just haven't figured it out. Most notably, I would say Alejandro Kirk comes to mind for me. But on the plus side, I mean, Bo Bichette's pretty reliable at the plate. Vladimir Guerrero, of course, mashed a few home runs for them against us. And until they find consistency, though, they're probably going to be, again, on the bubble. But would you say they're maybe further away from the playoff picture than you expected them to be at this stage?
I think that there's enough of a middling kind of mid pack that they're still in the conversation, but their main problem we've talked about a couple times now was the hot and cold nature of this offense. It's still a
Mm-hmm.
problem, and like you're right, Vladdy and Bo are heating up. But I think last time we talked about how Kirk was doing relatively well, and Vladdy and Bo weren't, and we made the call that it would go inverse, and that's exactly what happened. So it they just can't all get hot at the same time, and they can't sustain it for more than a series. So it's frustrating. Like this is so hard to watch. They're actually getting somewhat better pitching than they would have expected. This is a weaker unit than what they had last year. But with the offense performing like it is overall, this is just a definitely not a wild card team. Definitely not a wild card team from what we've seen, from the way that they've
Ooh.
been as inconsistent as they have. That doesn't mean that they won't be in the conversation. I think they could still manage if they go on enough hot streaks like we've seen them do in years past. But yeah, the I mean, hey, they did go after Seattle, but like Cal's got their number, and it's little things like that they just they let things like that beat them, and that's not a playoff team to me, Warren. I don't know.
Well, I don't want to sit here and say any team outside of Seattle is soft because, we could, let's wait for that a little bit later on. But Toronto, I think, is still trying to find consistency out of some key veterans here. And until they can, like you said, get hot at the same time, this will be a middling offense. And you have to pray with the pitching that they have that that's enough. And there's just no guarantee of that this early. So, very long race for them. Like I said, I have a feeling they're going to be an X factor in the wild card division, quite a gatekeeper one way or another, all the way to the end. And if they aren't, then they're wasting their year, and they can't waste this year. They
Yeah.
will do everything they can. Yeah. So, I've really hyped that up a lot over the last weeks. You guys know that. Less playing with less pressure on their shoulders, I'll say, are our next team, who were a riser for you last week. Maybe did enough to cool off here, but really shouldn't maybe have cooled off as one of your risers, bud, because the Tampa Bay Rays won 4 games, only lost 2 this week. Their overall record now sits at 7-6, so they certainly made up some ground and now sit over 500, even though they give up 11 runs to their opponents overall offensively. With big and quite intriguing series against San Francisco and the Angels coming up, which they just came off a big series with the Angels already. Uh, henceforth, the wins. Am I right, Dan?
Yeah.
Uh, well, what do you think? How come the Rays are not on your riser list at this point?
Well, they definitely are. They were on my riser last week, and
Yeah,
they are still on an upward trajectory, but they have kind of plateaued. Those losses with Colorado make it a little bit harder to swallow, and you could
true.
explain them away a little bit. Tampa hasn't been to Colorado in 8 years, so
Hmm.
nobody on the staff was super familiar, and they've even done interviews with Colorado pitchers who have admitted, like, yeah, they have a humidor here because of the elevation, the balls feel almost a little bit more wet than what guys might be used to, and these guys came from Tampa Bay, so about as opposite as you could imagine. So yeah, they struggled. It inflated the ERA a little bit. The main takeaway for me is that the bullpen is struggling even outside of that. They have a
Hmm.
3-3 record against teams over 500, and a lot of that is because they're potentially giving up more runs than they're scoring in those later innings due to the bullpen. So yeah, these next few series coming up will be a test. We'll see what these Rays are capable of instead of just beating up on Colorado.
Well, Jose Caballero has been beat up on a baseball the other day, and it was fun to see him hit his first homer as a Ray, having watched so much of him as a aggravating piece of the Seattle Mariner lineup last year. And it's cool to see him develop into a better player overall, I think, a bigger piece for this Tampa team than he was expected to be in Seattle. So I'm happy for him. And you're seeing the big power from Isaac Paredes, emerging here in the early portion of the season as he sits atop their leadership in home runs with 4. And I gotta think that maybe this offense is going to be good enough to keep them in the race with what they're piecing together as a pitching staff. We'll see. They're much more in the race than I expected them to be, and I love it. Okay, pundits, maybe you're right. Maybe we are supposed to go, hey, look, the Rays, they got worse. Playoffs, shrug.
Yeah.
Speaking of playoffs, shrug, we move into our next division with a team that was solidly should be riser, you would think. These Detroit Tigers are so confusing, Dan. They went 3-3 this past week, right in the middle of the road, and are now 8-4. Still, obviously, a favorable record. They don't really score that many runs though, and only have a plus run differential of 6 overall. Now we're gonna find out what they can really be against the winners of the division last year, with Minnesota currently on tap, and I believe they took Game 1 because Minnesota sadly was really struggling. But then they get to take on the defending champion Texas Rangers, so that could be crazy. But Dan, there's just a stink on these Tigers this week. Like they're looking matty and poorly bathed. You see, they lost a series first to those Oakland Athletics. Can you believe that? The Athletics got them. Got them. That's crazy. How can you be a contender if
Gotta
you're
have some
gonna?
level of expectations. Come on.
Yeah, come on, guys. Not to again throw soot all over the Athletics. I literally put that as off limits. But the Tigers, if you're going to be a contender, you have to be able to outpace a team like that offensively. You just have to. You have to. Um, And it turns out it was Jack Flaherty who gave up the 6 earned runs that pegged him the loss in that game. It was also
Your
the first.
boy.
I know. Yeah, Jack Flaherty. He came over from Baltimore, and it seemed like it was beginning the decline of his career, and now I think that's kind of affirmed a little bit, wouldn't you say? And for a hopeful
Yeah.
playoff team, that's a problem.
Yeah, for a team that really is trying to take that next step this year with a lot of their younger players. Not surprising to see kind of plateaus from a lot of them. And they don't hit a ton of home runs. They don't have a ton of stolen bags. They don't have a ton of runs scored, like you mentioned. And the pitching deficiencies aren't really helping that. And I know you have against all pitchers that ever wore a Cardinals uniform, Warren, but Flaherty is certainly not what he used to
Cardinals.
be. I could see him definitely coming back around, though. It's Detroit also. I got to see a couple of their younger pitching talent when they played the Mets. They're trying to spread things around and not rush some of their younger guys. So let's remember Detroit is probably still a year or two away. Like we talked about how they're kind of relying on Canna and Baez this year. And those guys' bats have still been pretty good. They're honestly the consistent bats in the lineup right now.
I
Well,
love
guys,
Mark Canna. He
or
makes it work on any lineup. Go ahead.
he
Sorry.
Dude, no, you please. It's hard to see him in another uniform. He was so good for us last year before
Yeah.
we let him go. And yeah, I'm happy to see Detroit still winning more games than I thought that they would have. So I think it's going to be cool to see them go against some of the top teams in the division. I think they're going to surprise some of those over 500 teams this year.
Well, it's all about the pitching if they can subdue. Because, Riley Green's their offensive, workhorse there. It would seem for Detroit, you can't really count on getting a ton of production out of Javier Baez at this point with his acting out here or there. But if the pitching can keep the offenses around the rest of the division, off kilter, then we're in business. I think their first matchup with the Royals is where my money's going, right? I'm really excited to see that. I believe, didn't Detroit and the Guardians share a series this past week, and the Guardians came out on top 2-1, I want to
Yeah, they
say?
outslugged them.
There we go. There it is. I thought so. So, wanted to make sure I wasn't completely off base as I pull up that team's schedule to triple check. So sorry. It was a different team. So, anyway, and I am apparently got my birds confused, man. Pardon me, guys. I was never one for, being a bird watcher. I definitely got my Orioles and Cardinals confused there. Jack
No James
Flaherty.
Bond over here.
No, well done. Thank you, man. I like my martinis. Hold the teeny. And let's move on to our next team, those Twins we were just mentioning. I mean, they did. That was the team that fell on their face a little bit to the Guardians this past week. Losing the 2 of the 3 that they got to play, they were rained out in the third one, of course. That'll be made up in August. But I think these Twins are just mediocre, man. I'll just get it out right there and say it. They only went 1-4 this past week. They're 4-7 now. They're losing offensive momentum, giving up 15 runs to the opposition. And now Detroit, this is a big series for them. If they can get, a little bit of momentum, that'd be helpful because then they have to take on Baltimore, and I don't think they're ready for Baltimore. So Minnesota's finally starting to show the cracks in the very shallow shell, apparently, with the injuries that they've had, and some of the offensive pieces just haven't caught fire fast enough. They're in trouble, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Twins still have the least amount of games played in the league, but they do have the worst offense in the league. Team average of 184, sub 200, Warren.
Mm-hmm.
It's abysmal, honestly. And Royce went down, and everybody else got so cold from there. They're 1-4 at home. Their offense is completely inconsistent. They're tied for the least runs scored in the league with the White Sox, 29 runs scored. It's abysmal. And the White Sox still managed to have a batting average at least 40 points higher. So it's really tough to watch right now. The Twins have enough pop from guys like Correa, but that it's not enough for them to win games. So It's
No.
tough to see right now. I thought did somebody get hurt from them recently? Oh man, I should have double checked. I'm sorry.
No, never. You don't have to apologize. We're all
Did you see
supposed to
an?
know everything at all times, aren't we?
Did you see a Twins injury?
Oh no, now you're putting it on me. See, now I feel your guilt and I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, Correa. I thought so.
Bum bum bum. We've
So
been waiting.
in the first game against the Tigers, Correa exited with a right oblique strain. He's probably going to go on the IL warrant. So is exactly what we talked about with the injuries. We already saw Royce.
Mhm.
Now it's Correa. I mean, the few bright spots on this team are going down, and the pitching is not good enough to support them. I'm surprised that they have 4 wins already, to be honest with you, because they don't have a lot more on the horizon.
Wow, that's quite a call. As you know, playoff graphs all over the internet, and pundits still agree this is a team that might offensively be able to buoy all these injuries. I know, we're clearly crazy, Dan. But the
We'll
the
see.
it just feels like this team can't do that. If they pull off a win in this division, good for them. But I'm still waiting for Byron Buxton to get hurt because
Right.
Minnesota. Um,
Yeah.
Not that I'm rooting for it. I wanted them to have a good year. As I said, they're one of my 12 favorite teams. But it's just the odds are not in their favor. You know, too many players have to be given over to IL tribute. Now
Speaking
speaking of,
of,
yeah, do it, dude. Hit that segue.
dude, speaking of the IL, how about Chicago? If things weren't bad enough before, they got as many wins as Miami. Luis Robert Jr. and Eloy Jimenez are out now too, Warren. I mean, can it get any worse? Is there anyone else?
No, there's no reason to buy a ticket. That's it. I hate to say it so black and white, but that's why I wanted to show up. Yohan Moncada? Oh, no, injured 3 to 6 months with a left abductor strain. And
Man,
I did have to look up what an abductor was, guys. Absolutely. Apparently, it's a group of muscles that go from the pelvic bone through the inner thigh and down into the knee. So if you ever need a spelling test you need to ace that for your, I don't know, adult college program, then abductor. There you go. It's right there for you. ABDU, who cares? It's going to be hard for the Chicago White Sox to sell off assets at the trade deadline, my friend, if they even hope to field a semi-interesting lineup for their fan base. I mean, this is bad news.
yeah, there's no good news in Chicago. It's unfortunate. The few bright spots to the roster that would have buoyed them to a few wins are now hurt, and they're not going to make any moves to change that. They're going to ride with what they have, and yeah, where we hopefully we'll see them squeak out some wins in their own division, but it's not like they have any easy games on the schedule coming up.
Let me tell you though, when the tough get going, the going get tough. We'll flip that. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, and Gavin Sheets, man, has been like rising to the occasion as the one bright spot on their lineup and hit a couple home runs, I believe, just yesterday, to give like a bit of a bright spot to the lineup, and you got to root for that. Good luck to any of the players that do anything for this team that's left. I think Paul DeYoung is also fitting in well and doing what
Yeah,
he should be doing to help them at least have some fun.
he's an ex Cardinal too, Warren. You hope that he tears an ACL or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Come to think of it, I hope he loses an arm. Okay,
Oh no.
just kidding. I don't. We don't need to trip over my Cardinals hate. It's inadvertent, I promise. Because I
Okay.
at least like Tommy Edman. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fair.
booyah. But I have no idea what Nolan Arenado is doing, calling himself a top shelf talent at this point. Hey, look, another team filled with top shelf talent. It's the LA
Oh,
Angels.
wow.
We've made it Los Angeles again. I feel like we're having deja vu. But over there, in Angels land, we're seeing some more injuries to pitchers, guys. Robert Stevenson's out. And I know I talked a lot of garbage about Chase Silseth being the pitcher I had the least faith in for this upcoming season for Angels baseball, but he's been more intriguing than I expected. But now he's injured too, Dan.
Man.
Oh my goodness. Now, thankfully, guys like Mike Trout and, like I predicted, Taylor Ward, I told you Taylor
Mhm.
Ward would be the soul of this team,
Yeah.
are off to a good start on the veteran side. But Logan O'Hoppe, their young catcher, who I think is still able to throw out every stolen base attempt we've seen so far. Like, I think he's still flawless this season. He's on the brink of a breakout season, if you don't mind me saying. And again, it only takes a couple of these younger guys to do well at the same time as the vets, and the Angels are in business. Their record may not reflect that entirely at the moment, but they're still over 500 at 7-6. They had a 3-4 week. They only have a -3 run differential, so they're on par with their opponents generally. And Boston's on the horizon again, another repeat series for them already, and then Tampa Bay again too. So they're going to run it back against some of these teams they've already played already, and we'll see if they come out on top. It could be a real indicator that maybe they're for real. What do you think of the Angels right now?
I'm impressed. It's like there's a pressure that's not there with Otani being gone, and we're seeing Trout perform. Like it feels like he hasn't the last couple of years. So we get a
Mm-hmm.
vibe that maybe he's healthy and playing confidently. And
And
Warren,
and needs to be the obvious alpha dog, right? Even
and,
though Taylor Ward is giving him a run for his money.
yeah, but Trout being the spiritual leader in at least that sense of being the veteran, that's working out for them. And more than Anthony Rendon got a hit. He's running the base paths. Things are looking up. I'm calling huge credit to manager Ron Washington here for really a super respected baseball guy for bringing back a lot of culture and bringing back the fun for the game. They have comeback wins. They're close in one-run games. It's great to see them kind of feel like they did before Otani got there almost. A team on the rise, a team that, hey, maybe they're not as far off as we thought.
Yes, and their arms are tightening up and getting well suited for the season. Reed Detmers pitched well today. Tyler Anderson pitched well yesterday. If Patrick Sandoval can start pitching well on his days, then this team is a capable 500 team. And I mean it. I think they could be really fun to watch as this season progresses. And as you know, as I've made it clear on this show, I have to root for the Angels somewhere in my heart, and I'm doing my best to. So go, guys. And I definitely love and agree with what you're saying about Ron Washington. I think it's really important for him to really tighten a hold on the reins around this lineup. And I think it's really cool that he puts Anthony Rendon as the leadoff hitter, by the way. I'm curious what your thoughts are, or if you have any on this, because I feel like it puts him on it right there in the spotlight. Get out there, you're the elephant in the
Yeah.
room. So go perform. Put your bat where your mouth is or whatever. Go
Mhm.
earn your money. And I think, you can learn pretty quickly what kind of Rendon you're going to get that day based on how you respond. So it's fun to
Right.
see. Yeah. Couldn't help it. What do you think? Anything we didn't cover about the Los Angeles Angels on this one?
No.
Good. The Texas Rangers are next, guys. They're our defending world champions, and they are definitely, well, I thought they were coming off to such a hot start, Dan, but this week they kind of cooled off. They are 4-4, and they're 8-6 overall on the season, therefore. 4-4 since we last spoke, Dan. Plus 24 on the run differential scale, so clearly mashing a lot of offense. No worries there. But when they go cold, they go cold. We've really started to see that suddenly. And they're currently playing their second series with Houston already into this young year. And I believe Houston edged them out this tonight, did they not?
Yeah, and it's been kind of close games, and sure they have some blowouts where they score a ton of runs, but you're right, they've been gone cold in those other ones. And 1-2 in one-run games is concerning for a team that's in a very tight division. Also concerning is their presumptive closer, Jose Leclerc, has struggled. He's cost them a couple of those one-run games, and they have some other options in the bullpen, but he was really their main guy. So if they can't use him as their closing option, alleviates some of the other depth from their bullpen. So yeah, another round against Houston, another series. We'll see how they respond. They both seen each other a little bit better, and we've definitely seen a different Houston team than I think what we expected. So they could easily manage a good rebound, and then certainly wouldn't be surprising to see them outslug a team like Detroit. We talked about their struggles.
Hmm. Fair enough. Absolutely. They should be able to. But then they have the Braves to test their confidence against. And that is going to be quite the test before they take on the Mariners near the end of the month. And then the Reds to close it out. But, dude, the Rangers, we didn't even kind of mention this apart from, well, the big scenario I need to point out is that the Oakland Athletics beat them in the series this past week. Hard to believe, I know, but that was the other big team that the Athletics were able to crumble was our own defending champions. So wild stuff there, and that there when you go cold, you go cold.
Hmm.
Now they did get that first win against Houston today. They have two more. They won't be splitting this series. No way to do so in a three set, unlike the four set that they had earlier this season. But it's going to be an interesting record to keep an eye on as April comes to a close. Where are the champs sitting? I wouldn't be surprised if they're not in as glowing a position as it seemed that they could be this early in the season when they started so hot. You know what I mean? Goodbye, Dan. Goodbye. Um, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, with more covering the bases. This time, let's cover my base, the Seattle Mariners, who
Ah,
didn't do enough to rise. They didn't do enough to sink. They won a couple games that I really wanted them to win, Dan. But why don't I let you talk first for a change?
sure, man. Well, hey, you threw around OPS a lot last week, so I thought I would just throw OPS at you for your Seattle Mariners.
Sure.
Third from the bottom at 28th, Warren. The only teams worse, the
Oh,
Mets and the White Sox. So, you know,
oh,
yeah, it's been rough. Strikeouts are an issue like we've seen from them in last year especially, and the random blowups from some of their supposedly premier pitchers. It's I know you're going to have a lot more to say on all this, but from an outside perspective, for me, I very much see a team that made the most acquisitions in the league last year in the offseason and recycled a lot of talent and brought in a lot of guys, familiar faces or not, bringing them into the team this year. And those guys maybe need a little bit more time to warm up, to heat up into things and just get comfortable in Seattle and traveling with the team because it just seems like they're all swinging a little bit out of their own box. And
mm-hmm.
yeah, it doesn't feel like they're far off from what they can be, but it is worth noting that while their acquisitions struggle, you got to look around the league, Warren, and see Jerry Kalenic and Teoscar Hernandez and Suarez all raking elsewhere. And,
Yes, yes, yes.
it's almost like I can imagine an M's fan being like, man, I wish we had one of those guys or all three of them.
You're not necessarily wrong, but the thing is there's the intangible of people wanting to play in Seattle. Like, do you want to be in the Pacific Northwest? Do you want to fight the marine layer? And the fact that it pushes your offense, against itself a little bit. It's a unique place to play baseball and a unique ballpark to play it in. T-Mobile Park is consistently ranked among, well, the least favorable to hitters. So it's a pitcher's game in Seattle more than anything else. And I don't blame a Teoscar Hernandez for being happier and more excited to play baseball for the Dodgers. I think there is a reality to that based off of things as simple as how comfortable it is to live there. Now, in the case of A. Eugenio Suarez, I know the entire Seattle Mariners organization is praying he doesn't look as awesome as he is so far as the season goes on. Awesome might be a strong word, but he's looking good. He hit a home run tonight to
Yep.
a 3-run bomb to make it interesting against the Cardinals. So we're praying he does prove to fall off eventually and not really be as good a contributor as he could very well be eventually for the Diamondbacks. And when it comes to Kelnick, yeah, I mean, young, capable of hitting, trading him away seemed strange. We were cutting salary, and you know it because I've said it. But at the same time, man, in this case, he didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be in Seattle. He did not fit into the grunge, kind of platform. Not that I'm saying Julio Rodriguez does or anything like that, but I am trying to say, like, his walk-up song was "Take Me Home, Country Road," and even though the fans loved cheering for it, there was something outside of Seattle and outside of the Mariners going on with Kelnick's, thinking and approach. And I think I'm happy for him that he's in Atlanta and that they're doing well. I wish we had those guys. Production, sure, but I don't wish I had those guys per se. I wish I had Suarez. His attitude makes everything better. I think that was a big move that didn't need to happen, especially when the replacements, my guy, are whiffing as much as the people they replaced. Polanco is basically Teoscar Hernandez. I think Mitch Garver is getting better with his approach, so I shouldn't really throw dirt on him. But the point is that the players that were kicked out for striking out apparently were replaced by people who are striking out, and I get that.
Yeah.
So I will say, having watched the Mariners as closely as I do naturally over the last couple of days, they're getting better. I do want to say that I think the strikeouts are going to start trending downward a little bit. I think we're going to start remembering that it's okay to let pitches go by and that it can be rewarding because some of these guys struggle to hit the strike zone. And that might be it right there, Dan. When you have a pitching staff that is typically regarded as capable of filling up the strike zone, you might swing out of your shoes a lot because you expect everybody else to as well. But thank God to Wicks tonight, the pitcher for Chicago, for pitching so many pitches outside the strike zone that my team gradually started to remember what it was like to take a walk. It was
Hey,
nice. Right.
nice.
So improvements are coming. I'm sorry I'm rambling so much, and I apologize, guys. But the Mariners are getting better. Bryce Miller's doing great. He's our best pitcher so far to start the season with a 1.96 ERA over 18.1 innings pitched.
Who
He
saw
had,
that coming?
hey, so far so good. So far so good. Logan Gilbert is I think pound for pound still the leader of the group right now, but you will hopefully see Luis Castillo and George Kirby start to rebound and get into their comfort zone now. We're not playing our best, and we're still only 6-8, by the way, and you know that, Dan. So there's still some question marks all over this team. We're not using Luke Raley at all. I'm not sure why or what the plan is, but I know my Locked On Mariners inspirations are like, we don't get it either. So I'm hoping that they continue to play with the lineup. I'm hoping that the offense continues to wake up because it's working. Cal Raleigh, of course, my hero, hit a huge bomb to give us a win over Toronto when it mattered most. As you said, owning Toronto, giving a big dumper all over them. So I'm seeing the signs of life I need to see, and Ty France is still off to a great start. Plenty of optimism is still sitting in my heart that this team is actually going to be okay. They just need to see certain things rebound. Sorry if that was just one giant run on sentence, everybody. Thank you.
No worries, man. It's a work in progress. I mean, they're not a riser and they're not a sinker, so we'll see how they respond these next couple series.
I agree. I'm looking at Jorge Polanco. I really need him to be a great example of himself. He had a great play for us defensively to take our Toronto game into extra innings um, at the end of that series, but we need to see more from him offensively consistently. And also Julio, hey bud, get a home run. You're doing great on the RBI side, and I get you're getting your base hits and you're hitting stuff real hard, but hey, hit one that's up in the zone. I think you'll hit it real far, kid. Let's do it. And now that concludes our base hits. Did that feel like we ran around the bases quickly? Tell us down in the comments below if you feel like certain teams got way too much love still. And I promise I'll try not to talk so much about the Mariners moving forward. Um, but now let's really highlight our risers and sinkers, Dan. I love this, where we really point out the patterned teams that are doing considerably better or worse than we expected. Do you want to go first? Shall I go first? What do you want?
I'm gonna hear you go first, dude. Give me one of your risers.
Yeah, I'll give a riser. After pledging that we would never kick dirt on top of this team and call them a sinker throughout this season, I want to give some love to the Oakland Athletics for being a solid riser. And how can you deny that? I'm not saying they're going to be division winners, everybody. Calm down. But they did have a 5-2 week. They now sit at 6-8. And even though they're anchored by a negative 21 run differential, they are proving that they have a puncher's chance if the pitching is motivated enough and is capable of subduing some of the lineups out there. And it's really kind of cool. They get a series win over the Tigers. They get a series win over the Rangers. It's hard to believe, but it's happening. Shane Langoliers, who I used to watch, guys, as the Las Vegas Aviator coming up in their system, one of the AAA team for the Athletics who play out here in Vegas. I used to watch him play. Shane Langoliers had 3 home runs the other night to help Oakland win that specific game. It's crazy. So it's a feel good story. And for all the sadness that kind of circulates this team, it's just really cool to say anything positive. Like they can beat the Detroit Tigers 2 out of 3, and they can beat the Rangers 2 out of 3. It's a feel good week for the Athletics, right?
Yeah, great riser. It was cool to see Shane do that at his hometown in Texas too. That was really cool to see. A little bit of hometown vibes coming through for that one. And yeah, the offense has been better than expected, honestly. And we're seeing a lot of guys that we really wouldn't have known their names the last couple of years get a chance to start for this team and take advantage of it. So if the A's are trying to lose, they're not doing a great job. And it's nice to see. So good riser, Warren. I like it.
Thanks.
I'm gonna come right back at you with one of mine if you're ready for it. And
I'm braced.
I don't think you'll be too surprised, dude. It's the San Diego Padres. I gotta say,
Ooh.
I've been very impressed. They're at an 8-8 record, but they've managed a 4-3 record over this last week since we last checked in with them. The pitching is still an issue, as we mentioned before, but Dylan Cease is here, and he is the new Blake Snell. and, and
I
you
see
know
that.
the offense has not cooled down. They snuck a win against the Dodgers in extras tonight, and it's actually that they are only second in the league in runs scored to those same Dodgers, only 1 run behind them. So they are keeping up to with the top teams in the league as far as offense is concerned. It's making up for their pitching deficiencies. So they're a riser for me. This looks like the beginning of a little run for the Padres.
That epic come from behind win over the Cubs, right? I mean, come on. So dope. So dope.
Love to see it.
Yeah.
They're not out of any game, this team.
No, totally not. They're fun. They've got the pieces that I felt like they needed in order to make a run. And so far, they're showing that those pieces are motivated and they want to be there and they want to make it happen. So go. And I love that Dylan Cease is on this team. I think Cease is cool. So I'm glad he went to a team that can really benefit from his arm. And they're showing they belong. And good luck. My next riser is the Cleveland Guardians. Yes, guys, I may have picked this team to win its division, but that doesn't mean it's still not super impressive what they're capable of doing right now. They went 3-1. They are now 3-1 since last week, guys. Excuse me. They're now 9-3 overall. They have a shockingly potent offense, Dan, that I'm sure is blowing us away. I mean, David Fry's doing great. The brothers Naylor. How did I not mention them before, man? They're basically the Uso brothers of Major League Baseball, and that is a cross reference to my wrestling passion, guys. But it's just crazy to see what the Nailers are able to do offensively. And on National Sibling Day,
That's
Dan,
awesome.
they both hit a home run in the same inning. It is totally awesome. I know it was against the White Sox, but what divine fate. I just can't believe they did that on National Siblings Day. You got to think that's a once in a lifetime thing, right?
I'm pretty sure they hit a home run on the same day last year, Warren. They've done this sort of thing
What?
before. This isn't new for the Nailers.
What? That seems impossible. How can that be so? I have to look that up, man. Not now, but I will. I need to. That's wild that they just seem to have this lucky. Oh, maybe it's not lucky, right? When you're a
Maybe
professional
not.
hitter, let me put my hands up and realize, like, hey, if you've done this enough, maybe you can hit home runs on command. But then when we see more of them all the time, I'm so
It's the
confused.
family connection, Warren. We've seen fathers and sons, we've seen brothers. Something about it. When one goes off, the other one's like, well, now I have to. I have to hit a home run. My brother did.
It's true. That's so compelling to see how humans are driven to be a little stronger than one another because of that familiar relation. But anyway, I'm focusing too much on that because the Guardians as a whole are really impressive. And yeah, it's heartbreaking that Shane Bieber is out with for the season getting Tommy John surgery. It's just so disheartening because it will be a major obstacle to this team making it back to the top of the division. But you can't tell yet that it's an issue. We haven't made it through the rotation all the way without him. So we'll see what happens over the next week. If they can still win 4 out of every 5 games, it may not be that big a deal. And there could be some arms coming up through their obviously reputable pitching system. So maybe they'll be okay. What do you think? Do you think they'll be okay, Dan?
Yeah, I do think they'll be okay. It's definitely a blow. They really could make a strong case for them going after the division title with Bieber, but without him, they're definitely more vulnerable. You just got to say, feel for Bieber too. He's such a talented pitcher, and he was on it this year, and it was into contract year for Bieber too. Like, it's worth noting that the Guardians tried to extend Bieber, and he didn't take
Mm.
it, and they also had trade offers thrown at them that they chose not to take. So this is a rough situation. Bieber's going to be entering his recovery next year, possibly without a team or on a much more scaled down deal as he tries to come back from it and then reprove to the rest of the league that he still got it. So, yeah, pouring out for Shane Bieber. Really sad to see, but Guardians are moving on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Moving on because you have to. The marathon just started, so again, it will be an interesting upcoming week as they prepare to face the Yankees and then the Red Sox, who have also been so intriguing this year, and noticeably absent from our talk so far. So
Hmm.
those two teams, we'll see what they can expose about Cleveland in the coming days. And then you've got a second riser for me, don't you, buddy?
Yeah, man, let's keep it in the AL. It's my turn, Warren. The Royals are a riser.
Ooh.
And man, oh man, they were 6-0 going into today, and they ran into a hot team from New York, I gotta say. But before that, the Royals were rolling. The offense has been on it, and a direct quote from Bobby Witt Jr. on a 7-game win streak. The vibes are great, and that's what it is in Kansas City. It's all about the vibes right now. Bullpen has been
Mhm.
shut down. Offense has been raking. Their 7-game win streak did come to an end, as I mentioned, but this is still a team that looks more potent than we ever could have expected. A plus 34 run differential for a 9-5 record, Warren. And I think that this is only the beginning. The Royals are hot, and getting hotter.
Well, one, I'm really happy for you because you did make a super bold call on these Kansas City Royals to be division winners, and I'm happy because it's fun. It's a great story. The story is definitely off to a hot start, and no, not Trevor's story, somebody else. The
Yeah,
story of the Royals doing well. I'm sorry, Trevor's story. I apologize. We'll get to you in a
yeah,
second.
brutal.
But with the Royals, I really wanted to put them as a riser this week too, Dan. But when I saw you list them as the team you were eyeing, I was like, okay, well, I'll let you have that because you called it, and they're doing amazing. But I want to go ahead and say I called that Vinny Pasquantino was going to be a big help, and
And he has.
huge for them the last couple of days. I just have to thank Kansas City. It feels so good watching the Houston Astros get absolutely turned on their heads. Two
Yeah.
days in a row, I think they got double-digit runs put on them by these
Hmm.
Royals. Like the tides are changing, and the it's really pretty cool. So, I my my full support's behind these Kansas City Royals. What a cool story. Let's hope it continues. My final riser of the week is going to be the Milwaukee Brewers because yeah, after a 5-2 week, of course, they did take 2 of 3 from us in Seattle. They're overall now 9-3. They have a plus 27 run differential, and they also completely manhandled Baltimore today. Like, what is happening? I'm so impressed and in awe with Milwaukee's total composure right now. They're playing with maybe the biggest chip on their shoulder out of anybody. Like their on-field product is abrasive, and you'll love to see it. Not only is Reese Hoskins was chippy on day one. I mean, you can argue the Mets were chippier, but just recently today there was bench clearing situation where there was some gab going on between the batter who had I think just been walked, or I don't think, was he hit? I can't recall. But anyway, there's a lot of fire in the bellies of the Milwaukee Brewers right now, like they're drunk on their own supply and ready for a fight, and they're fighting. So I love it. A series wins over the Mariners and the Reds this week. They get Baltimore in game one. They're feisty, dude. What do you think of them, man? You never expected this from them to be so good.
No way. Third best average in baseball right now behind Atlanta and LA. I definitely did not expect that. Uh, they are a team that is kind of not as defensively capable as we thought that maybe they could have been, but it's shown it doesn't matter. Their offense has been potent. It's been consistent. They have a lot of doubles. They've been good on the base pass. They have 19 swiped bags right now. Their
Hmm.
strikeout rate is relatively low. They're getting a lot of great on base opportunities, and I think having them as a riser is a good call. I think I myself was pretty low on them, and a lot of people didn't expect them to be able to maintain, but it's a good situation. And with guys like Churio learning in that situation, it doesn't mean that they can't continue to sustain and even grow from this point.
Let's hope Churio learned quickly, though, because there is some bad news. I kind of wanted to give the Brewers the riser while I still could, because their offense did take a hit with Christian Yelich, excuse me, leaving the game early this past afternoon. It hopefully won't be a major injury that keeps him off the field, but he was hobbled and couldn't return, so you don't want that. He has been playing really, really well. Quite a resurgent year for him. Already had 5 home runs, so definitely the power of the offense. So we'll see if they can reabsorb that, and hopefully we'll learn that it's not going to be a long layoff, because I've enjoyed this Milwaukee Brewers story, and I'd love to see it continue as is instead of taking such a devastating hit that it would be to lose Christian Yelich for some time. Wouldn't you say that'd be quite a handicap, huh?
Definitely, yeah, and you're right. He's just another one who looks like he'd been nursing injuries the last couple of years and was really healthy. So shame to see that because when he's healthy, he's an MVP level candidate. So hopefully he comes back soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got but one more riser to highlight, Dan. Bring it home, and I think you deserve it. There's a certain team who undeniably deserves a nod for being on an upswing this week. Give it to us straight, Dan.
Yeah, Warren, my third riser, it's the New York Mets. And I'm happy to say, after a slow start to the season and losing on opening day in our first couple series, the Mets finally were able to knuckle down and improve a little bit. And so we had a couple good games against the Braves. We knew that they would have a pretty potent offense, but our bats have been heating up. Guys like Lindor and DJ Stewart were a little bit slow to get started, but Alonso's been mashing. He's hit home runs in the last couple of games. Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil had slow starts. They've started to pick it up. And now in these last couple of games, we've seen Lindor as well. So it's encouraging to see the offense coming up. They just beat the Royals today, which that
Mm-hmm.
was concerning. A high offense team like the Royals, for the Mets to be able to keep up with them is great. And pitching's been a little bit of a concern. We've had a lot of injuries. We
Mm-hmm.
signed Julio Teheran for one game, and then we DFA'd him after he barely made it through 4 innings. And we've kind of had to go through a lot of younger players that we were hoping not to rely on from our minor
Mm-hmm.
leagues. We're not calling up some of our prized arms in Double A, but we're at a point now where surprisingly we have one of the best ERAs in the National League. So
Ah.
the bullpen is actually performing a bit better than we could have expected. And the main news right now is we're really waiting for JD Martinez to come and be that impact bat. We are still struggling with our DH position. JD is dealing with some back soreness, but hopefully he can come join the team soon. And yeah, Mets are on the rise. Like, we're dealing with the pitching struggles and still managing to win games. So it's good.
Is it sustainable, Dan? Is it sustainable?
It's probably not, but I'm hoping that as it starts to cool off, Senga comes back and the pitching starts to
Mm.
improve. So you hope for a balance in that regard. And with the struggles of Miami and Washington, there's no reason that the Mets can't stay in the mix for a wild card.
Yeah. Oh, hey, why not? There's again a lot of parity right now. Everybody's obviously a long way away from being eliminated, unless you're the Rockies or the Athletics spiritually. But we there's so much room for so much to happen, including some sinking, and that's where we'll turn our attention for now. And let's try to spit these out nice and quickly so we don't drag out the sad part of our show as we try
Yeah.
to bring it to an end. But tonight, I will point out that my sinkers um, surprised me. First, the Reds. They went 3-4 this past week. They're 7-6 overall now. They have a +10 run differential. And the reason why I'm looking at them as a sinker this week is because they just look like a team that, when faced with stiffer competition currently, is folding a little bit more than a riser or even a potential playoff contender would. And, I do think a lot of it has to do with those injuries and those concerns around suspensions and such, blah, 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 blah. But there's just a lack of consistency currently in their ability to beat the teams that look better than them on paper. So when they started off so hot and exciting, I just have to say they look like they took a step back. It's just kind of harder to see them as a superpower. And that's where I'm coming from this sinker. Not necessarily that they're terrible. They're just not as exciting as they were a week ago.
Yeah, man, I'm going to go with the Cardinals. I tried to hold out hope for them, but Goldschmidt and Arenado are as cold as ice, just like last year. And this team will not be good enough. They're 7-7 right now, so they managed to playing 500 baseball. But yeah, I'm really worried. A little bit of patience for them, but they're certainly starting to sink. They don't have enough talent on the roster to get past some of their pitching deficiencies without Arenado and Goldschmidt. So concerning. Cardinals are on the way down.
Well, you can't knock Nolan Gorman or Ivan Herrera for trying. They each have 3 home runs so far in the early portion of the year. Brendan Donovan and Wilson Contreras are also contributing a lot offensively. Just that the offense isn't, or excuse me, the pitching is a humongous concern. Even though they did get back Sonny Gray, hip hip hooray for that. Perhaps he was able to get through his innings, his 5 innings, not allowing a run. Maybe that's a spark that could help these Cardinals, but you know how
Yeah,
I
root
feel.
root.
Root, root, hooray! That's funny. Yeah, we'll have to think of a segment to build around that. But no, in all seriousness, the Cardinals, it's about time for you to understand that maybe that was a mischoice. I mean,
Hmm.
they did drop a series to the or not the series, but the first win of the Marlins season was against the Cardinals, and the losing
Yeah.
pitcher, of course, the losing pitcher was Kyle Gibson.
Uh,
I told you that guy was mid to meh. So I'm not
Warren
surprised at
hates
all.
another Cardinal. That's all I hear.
Dude, Kyle Gibson. Now I know Kyle Gibson came over from the Orioles. Come on now.
Yeah.
But he's the current. Yeah, I know. Okay, never mind. Anyway, um, yeah, I agree with you, dude. Good choice. The Cardinals are woe begone. But also, I have to go with some superpowers on my sinkers list because they're just not superpowers. I'll start with the one that I've been bandwagoning for, the Diamondbacks. They had a 2-5 week and now sit at 6-8. And even though their offense has been strong enough to give them a plus 14 run differential, they're a similar situation to the Reds. I kind of have the same vibe where right now their schedule is pretty tough and they're just not matching up well with those tougher teams. They're just proving themselves to be a step behind in this situation or at this stage of the year. And sure, I'm glad to see Corbin Carroll finally starting to stir, but getting completely swept by the Braves and even dropping a game to the Rockies right at the moment and this first game of their series with the Cardinals, it just feels like they're, not as beefy as they seemed with how hot a start they got just a week ago. So maybe kind of a shallow sinker, but the reality is when I'm bandwagoning them as a potential World Series contender again, this just wasn't a good look of a week. You know what I mean? Oh, and one more thing. Jordan Montgomery, their new pitcher, dropped his agent, Scott Boras, and that's maybe the overall vibe around Arizona at the moment. Drop your agent, guys.
Yeah, I think we call it that, maybe, that something like that would
You
happen.
did, Dan.
Yeah,
Kudos to
let
you. You thought this contract would really let down Boris's other clients and some heads might roll. So there you go.
Yeah, that's what happens. But hey, let's not forget that Montgomery is still working his way back here and warming up in
Hmm.
spring training. And that's, I don't know if I agree, Warren. The Diamondbacks definitely stumbled here, but I don't know if I have them as necessarily a sinker because you got Rodriguez on the way back too. Montgomery will be joining them. And the bottom half of the rotation has really been the weakness. They're winning those games that Kelly is still starting in the front half. So they can resolve that. I think that they can really fix a lot of these other issues, and they'll be back on the rise soon.
You don't drop games to the Rockies, buddy. I don't care. Okay. They sink. They sink for that. Oh, and they also just look kind of toothless against the Braves. Like, let's be real. If they're the target, getting by
True.
the Braves is the target for the National League, then they just didn't match up well this week. But hey, I don't blame you. I'm still rooting for the D-backs in my heart in major ways. Um, who's your next sinker, D?
Yeah, let's wrap up the National League. For me, it's going to be the Giants. It's just been
Boo. Yeah.
real rough on the pitching side of things for the Giants. Snell had a horrible debut, Warren, and the one win that they need to get at a Logan Webb, they couldn't get over the Angels. So really a whole lot of struggles from the pitching side of things. Young Lee, defense is getting better, but not seeing the offense side that we were hoping we would see. Seeing a little bit of pop, but not the consistency. Guys like Chapman and Mike Yastrzemski are also still pretty cold, and there's the Giants are not going to be able to take a step and be competitive in their division without guys like that stepping up on a consistent basis. So luckily, got to say, Michael Conforto has been leading the way for this team. He's been doing great,
Oh
actually, but we need
man.
to see some of these other names get into it. Until they do, the Giants are a sinker.
Dude, Michael Conforto is leading the way. No, how about that with a .5 WAR on the offensive end? No, it really is for the whole team. With a .5 WAR, Nick Ahmed is leading in that regard for this whole lineup. Like, whoa. Whatever happened to Matt Chapman paying dividends? Whatever happened to Jorge Soler being here to provide offense? Like,
Yeah.
everything's a little on its head. And to the credit, I mean, Jordan Hicks has been getting off to a better start as a starter than I think we expected, but he's really been the biggest bright spot. You're right in that pitching staff. And you just can't help but feel as if they're a step behind even the team that they need to be ahead of, you would think, to get into the playoffs in the first place. Those Padres that
Yeah.
our own little personal head to head is on. Like, sure, they were able to take two of three of them, the Padres, earlier in the week, but they then lost a series to the Washington Nationals and dropped their first game against the Rays today. It's a team that's not reading as well capable of being a postseason team right now. So good call out. I love it. I'm not going to argue with it. Get better, Giants. You're looking kind of small,
Mm-hmm.
especially small from all the way up where those Astros usually reside. And I know, guys, it's pretty high and mighty of a Seattle Mariner fan to call Astros sinkers, but something super strange happened to me. I was sitting on the couch last night, Dan, catching up on as many highlight sets as I could before I would pass out in the chair eventually. And I was watching the Houston Astros just hang their heads over and over again, as this time the Royals made complete examples out of them. And something super strange happened, Dan. You know what happened?
Hmm.
Felt bad for the Astros.
Whoa, what?
Because,
No, Warren.
dude, I know. That's how strange I felt it was for me too. So I have to call these Astros sinkers because I felt bad for them. And that seems impossible. They just don't. I mean, they're sitting at 4-11. They're the worst team in the division of the American League West right now. And I know it's still early, and I know they're still the Astros, and I know they're probably going to be a playoff team. But this week, even I have to call them a sinker because they are. They sunk my heart in that little moment. Should I not be? I mean, these guys aren't playing well, Dan. Speak on it.
Yeah, the pitching has been completely inconsistent. They've given up so many runs, and they've played a lot of potent teams like Texas, um, like Kansas City. So it's not unusual to see them struggle a little bit. But yeah, their bats aren't keeping pace, and that's the part that's concerning. 2-5 this past week and a negative 23 run differential is just unlike Houston. And even if the bats heat up, it's not unreasonable to question whether they have the pitching ability to really keep up with it. What good is guys like Hader if you're down by 4 runs in the bottom of the eighth? Doesn't matter at that point. So I think you're right to have him as a sinker. And yeah, concerned. This is strange to see the Astros. I don't feel bad
Yeah.
for them. I'm not there yet, Warren. We're not there yet.
Fair enough. I will say Ronel Blanco has been incredible for them, and obviously the
Yeah.
unexpected pleasant surprise. But even he couldn't win the game that he had the opportunity to do so against those Royals, right? So um, it's a tough place to be an Astro right now. You're feeling bad for them. May have been a bit extreme, but when you watch a bunch of grown men hang their heads and you just can't help it. But at least, well, you're right. I don't care. Screw the Astros. Fire truck the Astros.
There you go.
There we go. Back at it again.
Nice.
All right, man. Bring it home. Over the week, I was texting you saying these Red Sox, right? These Red Sox are surprising and they're compelling and they're winning series and they look good and they've won more games than they've lost this week. Maybe we slept on them, huh, Dan? And you texted me back a surprising response. Who's your final sinker of the week, Dan?
For me, Warren, my final sinker is the Boston Red Sox. And yeah, they have a positive 6 run differential. And yeah, they went 4-3 over this past week, but I'm not buying it, Warren. I don't believe it. They are leading the league in team ERA right now. And that's with Nick Pivetta on the IL. They are doing a great job from the pitching side of things, but they've had some favorable matchups. And obviously, we saw Trevor Story go down for them, which is a huge blow. He's going to be out for the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing guys like Tyler O'Neill really carry the team offensively. Guys like Devers be slow but start to heat up a little bit. And I'm calling BS on all this right now, Warren. With Story gone, with Pavetta gone, with the overperformance from the bullpen that we've seen over the last few days, I can see Boston winning the games that they have, but especially with some of the series they have coming up, with all the divisional matchups they're going to have coming up, I am not buying this team is on the trajectory that they have.
Well, boom, bam. Don't even worry about the Red Sox being a contender when it counts the most. I personally am shocked to think that you're that low on a team that's sitting pretty well within its divisional standings. I feel as if, Dan, you're overlooking the fact that those divisional matchups you're talking about aren't going to start coming back around on the schedule until next month. Like, darn it. But the rest of this month, they get to take on the Angels in another 3 game set. I know they dropped the first one today. You got to expect the 4 game set against the Guardians to really determine a lot of what this team is made of. You've got the Pittsburgh Pirates after that. Then, believe it or not, more Guardians and Cubs before ending it out against the Giants for the month. So I don't know. I feel like the Red Sox are a long way away from being counted out of the race, but your arguments are sound, man. I know Devers is struggling defensively. I was watching him make a lot of mistakes. He's taken some balls to the hand, and it's really kind of deterred him from being as strong of a defensive player as he has been in the past. So this is definitely a bad place for the Sox to be, but hey, maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they'll piece it together. So much can still happen. Lots of baseball left. This has been our breakdown of week 2 action across Major League Baseball. It has been a blast bringing all of this to you and covering all of our bases. But did we cover yours? If we did, let us know down in the comments below which of the hot starting teams we've called risers this week are among your favorites. Those Royals, right? We're stoked too. Do you think that Jackson Holidays is going to have a bounce back week and help the Royals continue this hot streak that just doesn't seem to want to quit?
Oh,
Let us know down in the comments below. If you want to say hi to your co-host who just came back into the recording because we had a humongous stutter in internet connection, let us know in the comments below. And if you think I did a good job improvising to run it on home without my co-host, you let me know in the comments below. Um, hey, I've covered our bases. Dan, welcome back. Would you say our bases are covered as well?
yeah, thanks for taking the last little wrap around third for me there, Warren. I appreciate it.
You look good. I hope you didn't hobble your hammy too bad, man. But hey, it's been a blast covering the bases with you. We'll see you guys next week when we take another trip around the bases.